Aaron Burr. Picture this. It's 1804. The sitting vice president of the United States challenges a man to a duel. They show up. One of them fires into the air. The other shoots him in the stomach. The man dies the next day. The vice president is charged with murder. And this is the part that should bother everyone. He goes back to Washington and finishes his term. That vice president was Aaron Burr. The man he killed was Alexander Hamilton, the former Secretary of the Treasury and one of the most powerful figures in the country. Burr had been blocked by Hamilton at almost every turn, including his run for governor of New York. So, he challenged him to a duel in Weehawken, New Jersey. Hamilton showed up, fired wide, and Burr put a bullet through him. Murder charges in 2 states. Active vice president. No trial, no consequences. The most powerful legal office in the country basically served as a get-out-of-jail-free card, and Burr used it. The Teapot Dome scandal. In 1921, Secretary of the Interior Albert Fall convinced President Harding to quietly transfer control of 3 naval oil reserves from the Navy to his department. Just a routine bureaucratic shuffle. Nothing to see here, except Fall had a plan. In 1922, with no competitive bidding and no public announcement, he leased exclusive drilling rights to the entire Teapot Dome site in Wyoming to the Mammoth Oil Company, owned by his longtime friend, Harry Sinclair. He did the same with 2 California reserves to another old friend. In return, these oilmen funneled Fall around $404,000 in cash, bonds, and livestock delivered to his New Mexico cattle ranch. The ranch had been falling apart. Suddenly, it was thriving. That's when investigators started asking questions. For 2 years, Fall covered his tracks as the investigation crawled forward. Records kept disappearing mysteriously. The whole thing seemed like it might hold together. Then one investigator found the one thing Fall forgot to hide: $100,000 interest-free loan from Doheny, delivered in a black bag by Doheny's own son. Fall became the first presidential cabinet member in American history to go to prison for crimes committed while in office. The men who paid the bribes were acquitted. The man who took the money did the time. Make that make sense. Watergate. Nixon was already winning the 1972 election by one of the largest margins in American history. He didn't need help. He got it anyway. Operatives working for his re-election campaign broke into Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel to bug phones and steal documents. They got caught by a security guard who noticed tape on a door latch. That tape, a piece of masking tape over a door lock, is what brought down a presidency. What followed was 2 years of the White House paying hush money to the burglars, obstructing investigations, firing prosecutors, and recording itself admitting to all of it on secret tapes they then tried to destroy. The cover-up was so much worse than the crime that Nixon ended up resigning before he could be removed. He is still the only president to ever resign from office. All of it started because someone taped a door latch and a security guard checked it twice. Chappaquiddick. On the night of July 18, 1969, Senator Ted Kennedy drove his car off a bridge on Chappaquiddick Island in Massachusetts. He swam free. His passenger, 28-year-old campaign worker Mary Jo Kopechne, did not. Kennedy did not call the police that night. He did not call them the next morning. 10 hours passed before he reported the incident, and in that time he apparently sought advice about how to proceed. A diver who later recovered the body said Kopechne's position in the car indicated she had survived in an air pocket for some time after the crash, which raises a question nobody has ever fully answered. Kennedy pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident, received a suspended sentence, and gave a televised speech where he left his political fate to Massachusetts voters. They re-elected him. He served in the Senate for another 40 years. What actually happened in those 10 hours, and what was said, has never been fully accounted for. My lie. On March 16, 1968, U.S. Army soldiers entered the Vietnamese village of My Lai and killed somewhere between 347 and 504 unarmed civilians, women, children, elderly people. The military filed an official report describing it as a combat success. That report held for over a year. It only unraveled when a single soldier named Ron Ridenour, who wasn't even there, started writing letters. He'd heard the accounts from other soldiers, documented everything, and mailed letters to Congress, the Pentagon, and the White House. The story finally broke in November 1969. The public was horrified. The scandal prompted outrage within a public already tired of the war and eroded domestic support significantly. Only one person was ever convicted. Lieutenant William Calley received a life sentence, served 3.5 years of it under house arrest, and was pardoned. The men who orchestrated the cover-up faced no criminal consequences at all. One soldier wrote letters. That's the only reason any of it came out. ABSCAM. It started as a stolen art investigation. The FBI recruited a con man named Mel Weinberg, who was facing prison time for fraud and agreed to help in exchange for leniency. They set up a fake company called Abdul Enterprises and invented a fictional Arab sheikh looking to invest oil money. What they expected was to catch a few small-time criminals. What they got was 6 members of Congress. As hidden video cameras filmed the transactions, several congressmen cheerfully accepted cash while making promises to the fake sheik on the spot. One congressman stuffed $50,000 into his pockets on camera while saying the money talks line like he was in a movie. Another said, openly and on tape, that he had larceny in his blood. When the story broke in February 1980, the country found out that undercover FBI agents posing as a fake Arab sheikh had essentially walked into the U.S. Congress and found it wide open for business. The story was so wild it was later made into the film American Hustle. The real version was stranger, the Dan White assassinations. Dan White was a San Francisco city supervisor who resigned in November 1978 over pay and frustration. Then he changed his mind and wanted his seat back. Mayor George Moscone initially agreed to reinstate him. Then, at the urging of Supervisor Harvey Milk, he changed his mind and decided not to. On November 27, 1978, White visited City Hall with the declared intention of killing not only Moscone and Milk, but also 2 other San Francisco politicians. He snuck in through a window to bypass the metal detectors, carrying a loaded revolver and extra ammunition. He shot Moscone 4 times in his office, reloaded in a hallway, walked to Milk's office, and shot him 5 times. Board President Dianne Feinstein was the first to find Milk's body and announced both deaths to the stunned crowd outside. At trial, White's defense argued diminished capacity, pointing partly to the fact that he had stopped eating well and had been consuming a lot of junk food, which journalists immediately dubbed the Twinkie defense. It worked. White was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, not murder, and served 5 years. He died by suicide in 1985. The verdict was so widely seen as a miscarriage of justice that California subsequently abolished the diminished capacity defense entirely. A man planned 2 assassinations, bought extra ammunition, avoided metal detectors, and a jury decided he couldn't have been thinking clearly. The murder of Congressman Leo Ryan. In November 1978, California Congressman Leo Ryan flew to Jonestown, Guyana, to personally investigate reports of abuse inside Jim Jones's People's Temple. He brought journalists and aides with him. At first, Jones received them. Residents seemed calm. Some even wanted to leave with Ryan. On November 18th, as Ryan's group waited at a nearby airstrip alongside about a dozen defectors, armed men arrived. The congressman was killed on the airstrip, along with 4 others in his party. Hours later, Jones ordered his followers to drink cyanide-laced punch. More than 900 people died. Ryan remains the only sitting member of Congress ever killed in the line of duty. He went into a jungle to check on American citizens. The government he represented had no idea what was happening there until it was over. Iran-Contra. In 1985, President Reagan stood in front of the American Bar Association and named Iran as part of a confederation of terrorist states. What he did not mention was that members of his own administration were, at that exact moment, secretly negotiating to sell weapons to Iran in exchange for help releasing American hostages in Lebanon. The profits from those arms sales were then secretly funneled to Nicaraguan rebel forces known as the Contras, in direct violation of a law Congress had passed barring exactly that. When the operation unraveled, National Security aide Oliver North shredded documents for days. Reagan went on television and said the buck stopped with him, but that he genuinely hadn't known. Several members of his administration were convicted. Their convictions were later vacated or pardoned. North ran for Senate, lost, and became president of the NRA. The government broke federal law to fund a foreign militia using profits from selling weapons to a country it publicly called a terrorist state, and almost nobody went to prison for it. Rod Blagojevich. When Barack Obama won the presidency in November 2008, his Illinois Senate seat became vacant. As governor, Rod Blagojevich had the power to appoint a replacement. The FBI had been wiretapping him for months. What they caught on tape is still hard to believe. The day after the election, Blagojevich told an advisor, "I've got this thing and it's golden. I'm just not giving it up for nothing." Over the following weeks, he explored a trading of the seat for a cabinet position, an ambassadorship to India, a $300,000 a year nonprofit job, or campaign cash. He compared himself to a sports agent negotiating a contract. The U.S. attorney who announced his arrest said Blagojevich's behavior would make Abraham Lincoln roll over in his grave. He was convicted on 17 federal corruption counts and sentenced to 14 years in prison. He was later pardoned by Donald Trump. At one point, Blagojevich had seriously considered giving the seat to Oprah Winfrey. He had the most consequential appointment of his career, and he spent weeks trying to auction it off like a car. The Pentagon Papers. For years, the U.S. government told the public the Vietnam War was winnable, told Congress the same thing. Meanwhile, Internal Defense Department analysis was saying something completely different. In 1971, military analyst Daniel Ellsberg leaked 7,000 pages of classified documents, proving that multiple administrations had known far earlier than they admitted that the war could not be won. They kept sending people. Nixon tried to get the Supreme Court to block publication. He lost. Then his team broke into Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office looking for personal information to use against him publicly. The cover-up of the original lie required a separate crime to try to silence the man who exposed it. The papers were published. The war continued for 4 more years. If this helped you understand American political scandals, hit that like button. Subscribe for more true crime and dark history explained simply. Thanks for watching.